Temptation's Fire, a cheating story that burned my heart. Hey, Livia dreamers! Welcome to our haven of stories where hearts collide, shatter, and find their way back to light. Today, we're diving into a saga of love, betrayal, and the choices that redefine who we are. If this tale grips your heart or sparks a tear, hit that like button, pour your thoughts into the comments, and subscribe to Livia for more stories that make you feel every beat of the human soul. Let's begin. It started with a whisper that felt like a spark, igniting a fire I didn't know could burn. "Nora, you're a song no one's dared to sing," he said, his voice a low tremor slicing through the gala's golden hum. This was Julian Hayes, my husband's boss, a man whose presence could bend the world to his will. And in that stolen moment, under the flicker of crystal chandeliers, I felt a pulse I'd buried deep, a dangerous tide pulling me toward a choice that could drown the life I'd built with Ethan, the man who'd given me his heart and promised me forever. I'm Nora Bennett, and for 11 years, I've been married to Ethan Carter, the kind of husband who makes you believe in love that endures. Ethan is a creative director at a top-tier advertising firm, his days consumed by high-stakes pitches, client dinners, and the relentless chase for brilliance. He's the man who wakes me with a soft kiss, who leaves doodled notes on my nightstand, who works himself to the bone to give us a life of warmth, a ivy-covered cottage with a porch swing, weekend escapes to the lake, dreams of a family we're still sketching. Our life is a tapestry woven with quiet joys and steady love, but lately I've felt like a thread unraveling, fading into the pattern, unnoticed in the rhythm of our days. In the beginning, Ethan's ambition was a symphony that swept me away. I fell for his fire, the way he'd stay up all night crafting campaigns, his eyes alight with dreams that felt like ours. I was an illustrator then, painting children's books with whimsical worlds, dreaming of a series that would live on library shelves. But when Ethan's career surged, I set my brushes aside to be his foundation, planning client events, keeping our home a sanctuary, being the wife he could rely on. I told myself it was a season, that my colors would return. Yet, as a decade blurred into 11 years, I felt like a canvas left blank, my hues dulled by routine, my heart aching for a stroke of something vibrant to remind me I was still Nora. Then came Julian Hayes, Ethan's boss, a man who moved through life like a storm you couldn't look away from. Julian was in his late 40s, all bespoke suits and quiet power, with a voice that could command a room and a smile that felt like a secret carved just for you. At company events, he was a beacon, executives, interns, everyone drawn to his orbit. I'd known him for years, always at a safe distance, a handshake at a fundraiser, a compliment on my scarf at a holiday gala, a shared laugh over a client's quirky brief. But there was always something in his eyes, a flicker of intensity that made my breath catch, though I told myself it was nothing, just the charm of a man who knew how to wield it. It started with moments so small they felt like whispers, each one a crack in my resolve. A company picnic where Julian sought me out, asking about my illustrations with a curiosity that felt too intimate. "Your art must be as vivid as your spirit," he said, his gaze holding mine until I looked away, my cheeks flushed. A team happy hour where he sat across from me, his foot brushing mine under the table. The contact so fleeting I convinced myself it was chance. A moment at the office when I dropped off Ethan's lunch, Julian's hand grazing mine as he took the bag, his fingers lingering like a promise. Each encounter was a pebble in a still pond, rippling through my heart, stirring waters I'd kept calm for years. One evening, Ethan came home late, his tie loosened, his face etched with exhaustion. "Big pitch tomorrow," he mumbled, kissing my forehead before sinking into the couch. I nodded, my eyes on the sketchpad I hadn't touched in months, my mind elsewhere. Our nights had become this, brief, disconnected, the space between us filled with unspoken needs. I missed the Ethan who'd steal my pencils to draw silly faces, who'd pull me into a dance under the kitchen light. Now he was a silhouette, consumed by deadlines, and I was a ghost, haunted by a restlessness that clawed at my soul, a hunger for something to make me feel alive again. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Julian. Not Ethan, but Julian. Lunch today? Need your vision for the gala's theme. It was a plausible excuse. I'd helped with the firm's annual charity gala before, choosing decor, curating playlists. But the message was a key to a locked door, daring me to turn it. My heart pounded, my thumb trembling over the reply. Lunch was safe, wasn't it? Just business. But a voice inside whispered it was more, a spark waiting to blaze. I typed sure, I'm in, and hit send. The decision aflame I couldn't extinguish, a choice that felt like both freedom and betrayal. The restaurant was a sanctuary of secrets, candlelit tables, velvet drapes, the soft clink of wine glasses like a heartbeat. Julian was waiting, his charcoal suit sharp, his smile a weapon that disarmed me. Nora, you're a vision, he said, his eyes tracing me in a way that made my skin hum with warmth. We ordered Sauvignon Blanc, talked about the gala, centerpieces, lighting, auction items, but the conversation shifted, like a tide pulling us out to sea. He asked about my illustrations, my abandoned dreams, listening with an intensity that made me feel like the only soul in the world. You're too radiant to fade into anyone's background, he said, his voice low, deliberate. You deserve to shine. My breath caught, his words sinking into a part of me that had been starving for light, rekindling a fire I'd thought was ash. Over the next 2 months, the encounters multiplied, each one a step toward a line I swore I'd never cross. A chance encounter at the office, when I brought Ethan's forgotten jacket, Julian's fingers brushing mine, his touch lingering like a melody I couldn't forget. A coffee run after a gala planning session, his laughter warm as he teased me about my latte art obsession, his hand grazing my arm as he handed me my cup. A late-night email about vendor contracts that ended with, "You were unforgettable today." Each moment was a thread, weaving a web I didn't want to escape, a tapestry of desire and danger that felt like a new skin. I told myself it was harmless, that I was still Ethan's wife, that I could stop anytime. But Julian's attention was a drug, and I was addicted, chasing the high of being seen, of feeling alive. Ethan, meanwhile, was drowning in his work. His firm was chasing a career-defining client, and Julian was relentless, demanding all-nighters, weekend retreats, perfection in every detail. "This is it, love," Ethan said one night, his voice weary but hopeful, his hands cupping my face. "If we land this, we're set for life." I smiled, kissed his palm, but my mind was on Julian's latest text. "Missed you in that meeting today." Guilt was a blade in my chest, sharp and cold, but it wasn't enough to stop me. I was caught in a dance, and the music was too loud to hear my own heart. The weeks bled into a haze of stolen moments and buried guilt. I started sketching again, late at night when Ethan slept, my pencils tracing the lines of my restlessness, shadowed figures, cityscapes under storm clouds, a woman with eyes like mine, searching for something she couldn't name. The act was a lifeline, a way to hold on to Nora, but it couldn't drown out Julian's voice, his words echoing in my mind like a song I couldn't stop humming. I was living 2 lives, one as Ethan's wife, smiling through dinners and routines, and another as the woman Julian saw, vibrant and untamed, teetering on the edge of a choice that could destroy everything. The gala was the breaking point, a night that shimmered with beauty and burned with peril. The venue was a vision, marble columns, cascading chandeliers, a jazz quartet weaving a spell through the air. I wore a sapphire gown that clung to me like a second skin, a reckless choice that made me feel like the Nora I'd lost. Ethan was trapped in a corner, charming clients, his smile strained under the weight of expectation. Julian found me by the dessert table, his cologne a mix of cedar and midnight, his eyes locking onto mine like a key in a lock. "You're the pulse of this night," he said, his voice a low rumble, his fingers grazing mine as he handed me a champagne flute. The touch was electric, a current that made my breath catch, my heart a wild drumbeat. We talked, laughed, the crowd fading until it was just us, the world shrinking to the space between our breaths. When Julian suggested stepping into the venue's rooftop terrace to review the auction setup, I knew it was a lie, but I followed, my heart a wildfire I couldn't contain. The terrace was a dream, strung with fairy lights, jasmine heavy in the air, the city's skyline a glittering promise below. Julian stopped by a stone fountain, his eyes searching mine, raw and unguarded. "Nora," he said, his voice breaking, "I can't keep this inside anymore. I see you, every piece of you, every dream you've buried, and I want you in a way that's tearing me apart." My pulse roared, my mind screaming to run, but my body stayed, caught in the gravity of his truth. "Julian, we can't," I whispered, but my voice trembled, betraying the fire in my veins. He stepped closer, his hand hovering near my cheek, and for a heartbeat, I leaned into the possibility, imagining a life where I was his, free from the weight of vows and routine. Then Ethan's voice cut through the night, raw and jagged, like a blade through silk. "Nora? What is this?" He stood at the terrace's edge, his face pale, his eyes a storm of hurt and betrayal. Julian stepped back, his expression a mask, and I felt the earth crack beneath me, a chasm swallowing the life I'd known. "We were just talking about the auction," I stammered, the lie tasting like ash, bitter and choking. Ethan's gaze, once my safe harbor, was a tempest, clouded with a pain I'd never seen. "Right," he said, his voice cold, and turned away, his footsteps echoing like a heartbeat fading. The first twist wasn't Julian's confession. It was Ethan seeing it, feeling the truth I'd buried deep in my soul. The drive home was a silent wound, the city's neon lights blurring through my tears, each one a shard of guilt. I wanted to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but Ethan's hands were white-knuckled on the wheel, his silence a blade sharper than any accusation. At home, he went to the guest room, the door's quiet click louder than a scream, echoing in the hollow of my chest. I lay awake, replaying every moment, the lunches, the texts, the terrace, hating myself for letting Julian in, for letting myself drift. I hadn't kissed him, hadn't crossed that final line, but I'd betrayed Ethan in my heart, and the guilt was a tidal wave, pulling me under, drowning me in regret. The next month was a slow bleed, each day a reminder of the fracture I'd caused. Ethan was a ghost, leaving before dawn, returning after midnight, his eyes avoiding mine like I was a stranger. I tried to bridge the gap, cooking his favorite pot roast, leaving notes like he used to, suggesting a weekend by the lake, but he was a fortress, and I was the one who'd burned the bridge. My sketches became feverish, filling notebooks with images of broken wings, shadowed cities, a woman with my face, trapped in a storm of her own making. Julian, too, retreated, his texts stopping, his presence at work events a shadow. I should have been relieved, but a shameful part of me ached for the thrill, the way he'd made me feel alive. That realization was a mirror, showing me a woman I didn't recognize, and it broke me more than Ethan's silence. I started seeing a therapist, a quiet woman named Dr. Ellis, who listened as I poured out my guilt, my fear, my longing to be Nora again. "You're grieving," she said one session, her voice gentle. "Not just Ethan, but the woman you were, the dreams you shelved." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me toward a truth I'd avoided. I'd let Julian in because I'd lost myself, and no amount of his attention could fill that void. I began illustrating again, not just sketches but full paintings, vibrant forests, children laughing under starlit skies, a woman stepping out of shadow. Each stroke was a step toward redemption, a way to reclaim the pieces I'd given away. Then came the second twist, a revelation that shattered what was left of my heart. One evening, Ethan came home early, his face haggard, a leather-bound notebook in his hand, not his usual planner, but something intimate, its pages worn from years of touch. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but laced with a pain that cut through me. He opened the notebook, revealing pages of his handwriting, not campaign notes, but letters, hundreds of them, addressed to me. "I've been writing these since we met," he said, his eyes meeting mine, raw and vulnerable. "Things I couldn't say out loud. How I'm terrified I'm not enough for you. How I see you fading and I don't know how to bring you back. How I love you more than life itself." Tears streamed down my face as he read one aloud, his voice breaking. "Nora, you're my North Star, but I'm scared I'm dimming your light, and I'd rather let you go than watch you disappear." He closed the notebook, his hands trembling. "I tracked your phone, Nora, not because I didn't trust you, but because I felt you slipping away, and I was desperate to understand why. Then I saw you with him, on that terrace, and I knew I'd failed you." My heart shattered, not just for my betrayal, but for his hidden pain, the weight he'd carried alone, the love he'd poured into words he never shared. "Ethan, nothing happened," I choked out, my voice thick with regret. "Julian, he said things, made me feel things, but I didn't act on it. I love you." "I'm so sorry." But Ethan shook his head, his eyes distant, a man staring at a horizon I couldn't reach. "You let him in," he said, his voice a whisper, each word a wound. "You let him see parts of you that were ours. I gave you my soul, and it wasn't enough." He stood, the notebook left on the table like a gravestone, and walked out, leaving me with a truth I couldn't escape. I'd broken us, not with a touch, but with a choice to let temptation linger, to let my heart wander where it had no right to go. The weeks that followed were a descent into a grief I hadn't known was possible. I kept painting, my canvases filling with the colors of my pain, crimson storms, indigo skies, a woman with my eyes, reaching for light. I moved through our home like a ghost, each corner a memory of Ethan, his laugh in the kitchen, his hand in mine on the porch swing, the notes he'd left that I now kept in a box, a shrine to what we'd lost. Julian's absence was a quiet relief, but it couldn't erase the shame of how I'd let his words unravel me, how I'd traded my truth for a fleeting thrill. Then came the third twist, a quiet revelation that shifted the ground beneath me. One afternoon, while cleaning out a closet, I found a sketchbook I hadn't touched in years, its pages filled with my old illustrations, storybook worlds, children chasing fireflies, a couple dancing under a moonlit tree. Tucked inside was a note from Ethan, dated 5 years ago. "Nora, your art is magic. Don't ever stop. I believe in you always." The words broke me open, not with guilt, but with a clarity I'd been chasing. Ethan hadn't just loved me, he'd seen me, even when I couldn't see myself. And I'd let that love slip through my fingers, chasing a shadow that was never mine. The fallout was relentless, a wildfire that consumed everything I'd held dear. Ethan moved out, renting a loft across the city, and filed for divorce 3 months later, the papers arriving like a final note in our symphony. The news tore through his firm, whispers trailing me like smoke at every event I still attended, clinging to fragments of our old life. Julian faced the board's scrutiny, his golden reputation cracked, though he clung to his role by a thread. I saw him once, a year later, at a bookstore. "I never meant to destroy you," he said, his charm faded, his eyes tired. I nodded, said nothing, and walked away, knowing the spark I'd chased was a flame that had burned me to ash. I lost more than Ethan. I lost our cottage, our dreams, the woman I thought I was, loyal, whole, enough. But in the ashes, I found a flicker of redemption. I kept painting, my work finding its way into local galleries, each canvas a step toward the Nora I was becoming. I moved to a studio apartment, took a job teaching art to children, their laughter a balm to my wounds. I started writing again, not just poems but stories, weaving the threads of my pain into something new. Ethan, I hear, is healing, dating, smiling, finding his light again. It aches, a quiet bruise, but I want that for him. He deserves a love that doesn't falter, a heart that chooses him every day. As I sit here now in my small studio, my easel splashed with color, the cities pulse a soft hum outside, I think about that night on the terrace, the choice I didn't make, and the one I did, to let Ethan go, to let myself grow. Love isn't a spark that blinds you or a thrill that fades. It's a choice, a daily vow to show up, to see and be seen, even when it's messy, even when it hurts. I failed once, but I'm learning, choosing myself every day, hoping to one day choose another with the honesty I owe them. The future is a blank canvas, and for the first time, I'm ready to paint it. If Nora and Ethan's story of heartbreak, betrayal, and redemption broke your heart or lifted your spirit, please share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Livia for more tales that remind us what it means to love and rise again. Where are you watching from? Tell us below, and until next time, keep choosing your heart's truth.